Greetings, adventurers! Welcome to the very first episode of the Crithalla podcast. My name is Ol Skipflack. I'm joined here by my wonderful co-hosts here. We have Stavi, Sodope Stavi. What's up, buddy?
What's going on? Good to see you all.
Good to see you too. And we also have my buddy Mike, Cosmic Key. What's going on, pal?
I'm wonderful and lovely. Thank you.
Oh, that's so cute. That's so awesome.
I try.
So here on Crithalla podcast, we're running this show more or less at DMs Discuss, where every episode we take one pretty broad question, and it's mostly about DMing, and we have a big old conversation about it. And there's this question that's been burning in the back of my mind for a while, so I guess we'll start off with this one. What are your favorite ways to introduce new characters into your brand new world? Either, your new campaign that you're starting, or maybe your one shot that you just started and you're just running for the hell of it. What exactly do you like to do? I thought about this question because I was at a game store a couple months ago, and there was this guy there. He was talking about DMing and stuff, and I got into it with him. And he was like, "Yeah, I just started out by introducing my players into this new world and all that." And I was like, "Oh, well, how'd you do it? I'm sure you did it at a tavern, right? Because everybody does it at a tavern,
It's always a tavern.
It's always a tavern." But he was like, "Well, yeah, I did that, but check it out." So I put all my players into a tavern, and they all hung out, and they ate, they drank, they kind of got to know each other a little bit, and apparently the elixir that they were drinking was poisonous, and they all got knocked out, and they were brought into this I guess big dungeon or room, however he described it, and he took everybody's character sheet. And he wanted specifically everyone to have a backstory. And he took tiny little sections out of each person's backstory. And he made them into riddles, keys, all different types of puzzles that you had to solve in this dungeon. And they all had amnesia. So they wake up and they don't remember anything about themselves. They don't remember who they were talking with. They don't even remember how they got there. And as they went through the dungeon, they were reminded, like, oh, that's something I remember about myself. And they put the riddle together. And so not only was it, they were learning about themselves, and the other characters were learning about the other characters, but it all came in where at the end of the story, they now not only knew how to play together, but they also knew literally their entire backstories. And I always thought that was so interesting. Because I always think like backstories, right? Like backstories they're hard to implement unless you somehow force it in a way. I don't know what you guys think about that.
I hope those players appreciated that.
Yeah, because I
was a lot of effort on that DM's part.
Right, I would have never thought of anything like that before. I thought that was pretty interesting, and that's what it started to make me think, like, what are some cool ways to do it? Because not gonna lie, I've only been DMing for a year now, and I've only introduced new characters twice, and it was at a bar. It was at a tavern. I mean, it's worked out like that, where it's just nice and easy, and sometimes the players just go along with it so easily, and they learn about themselves that way. But yeah, I've been basic. I'm not gonna lie.
No.
But the two of you guys have way more experience than me in terms of DMing. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen anything or have done anything yourselves to bring new characters into it.
Yeah. So, Mike, if you don't mind.
Oh, by all means.
So I've been a DM and a player on and off for about 9 years, almost a decade now. Dan, actually, we started together.
Yep.
Back in, I have my notes here, 2013.
2013.
2013. I was still kind of
we were wee lads back then.
We were, yeah. You still, yeah. Oh man, those were the days.
Mm-hmm.
So, from my personal experience, from the perspective of a dungeon master or a game master, this extends to all tabletop RPGs. I feel the number one core thing that dungeon masters and players alike need to keep in mind, especially when designing a new world or starting a new campaign or a new session, is expectation. And I feel like expectation is a massive, if not the most like paramount key cornerstone of any game session.
Makes sense.
Right. So for the Dungeon Master, you don't just start a game and say, hey guys, come on over, we're going to do something completely different, right? Especially if it's their first time playing. You kind of want to gauge sort of what level of experience they have with the fantasy genre. That you also want to explore with your players what kind of fantasy genre they want to play. Is it going to be riddles? Is it going to be dungeon crawling? Is it going to be like a murder mystery or like a detective story? There are many ways that you can go about it within the fantasy setting. And as players, you owe it to your players to know what they are expecting. So that way you could set it up in a way that not only you enjoyed as a DM, but the players can enjoy it and interact with the world. And I don't know. I feel like it needs to start from that level of expectation and communication between the players and the DM.
Yeah, definitely. Because you always need a good balance, because there's always those players that want to do one thing, like constantly battle, and then there's the other players that want to just straight RP. So you have to find that good balance and introduce them in a way where it's, they can all have fun while you're having fun too.
Absolutely.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, sometimes people forget that the DM has to have fun as well.
Yeah.
Like he's not just the dice. Like he's not just the game board. He has to enjoy themselves as well. Otherwise they don't want to do it.
Exactly. Because it can be very stressful sometimes too. I know there's times where I'm like, oh man, we're in the like 3 hours into a session. I'm like, man, is this fun? Is this enjoyable? Or is everyone just sitting here like, man, I can't wait to get through this?
Yeah, I find it the most stressful when the players ask me questions that I personally as a storyteller don't give a crap about. Like, oh, there's like a rune etched into the wall. Well, how high in inches is it from the floor? And I'm like, I don't know. It's in the wall. Like, I don't.
Exactly.
Why does that matter? It's like, well, I want to know how what's the diameter of the circle of the circumference of the rune. And I was like, it's an F. I don't know. It's a ruin.
It is what it is. Well, Mike, I know you're running a game right now, in like a fairy tale-esque setting.
Yeah.
I know you've been working on that for a while. How did you end up introducing your brand new players into your world?
I always, and it's not just them. I've been doing this a little more than you wee lads. Almost 30 years for me. Yes, very old. So, I always start as if I'm like a used car salesman, and I have to pitch anything I want to do to my players. Because they could just not play, they could just run it themselves, they could find a different game, they could sabotage the game, so you have to sort of like really win them over with the pitch. Then, usually I want them to make a background for their character and history, and then I try to like interweave my setting into their histories anywhere I can. Like, they can't just exist in my setting in a vacuum. In order for the world to be alive, they have to live in it. So it can't just be, but I want to worship Zeus. So I'm like, well, there's no Greek god in my game, but I want to worship Zeus. No. You have to worship something that's part of my world. Then, usually then when the game starts, I always tell my players, my world will move on and continue with or without you. You are important because you're the players, but the world doesn't think you're important.
Absolutely.
If there's a monster in the woods, it's still going to eat maidens if you stop it or not. It's like the villagers are still going to get pitchforks for it if you want to do it or not. I've had a lot of players miss out on adventures because they just like, let's just not do that right now. And then like a village is destroyed. And they're like, but why didn't the adventure wait? And I'm like, it's not a video game until you talk to the person with the question mark above their head. Like, it's a living thing. They said they'll be here in a day. You weren't there in a day. They left.
Right.
So you have to, it's all about interweaving for me. Like, the players have to be part of the world, but the world has to be a part of the players. And if they don't care about the legends or the rumors or the story or the myth or the gods, then it kind of falls apart. And then what's the point of putting the effort in?
Yeah, I mean, because you're making the game for the players. So as much as you want to include what they want to do, you also do have to eventually get to what you need to get to. So it's regardless of certain things. Like I'm a pretty freeform DM. Like if you want to do something crazy or if you want to make up something, as long as it sounds good and it can be somewhat balanced, like just go for it. Like, and we'll figure it out later. And
and it's funny that you mentioned that too, because the last time that I played as a player was actually Mike's game, but right before that it was with you, Dan.
Yeah.
And I was playing as a goblin warlock by the name of Zod.
Yeah.
Zod,
and,
yep.
That was so good.
Zod had he had the ability to call forth this sort of cosmic horror tentacles that he can summon 2 per encounter.
Yeah.
And so that rule was in the official Wizards of the Coast D&D 5th edition stuff, but you didn't have access to that stuff at the table. And I know a lot of DMs, me specifically, I'm one of these DMs where if you can't present the rules for whatever it is that you're trying to do to the table, I mean it's hard for me to want to let it slide in a game.
Yeah.
Because a lot of players, what they love to do is power fantasy. And it's one of the reasons why I don't really care too much for 5th edition in that regard, because by level 6, you're a demigod.
It's so true.
God forbid you're a level 6 wizard and you're casting fireball at 7th level or something, and you're deleting a mountainside.
Yeah.
No, that's 100% true. That's why, like, a lot of my wizards, I choose spells based on personality. So, like, if my wizard isn't destructive that way, I'll never take fireball. In 2nd edition, I had an illusionist, and I retired him at 20th level. He had a family. He ran a town. I never took fireball ever. And I could have, and the group wanted me to, and I was like, no, I'm an illusionist. Why? Like, no.
That's
and
fair
I just
enough.
never. I had opportunity. The DM even gave me a Staff of the Magi, which is like a destructive magic item, and I was like, nah, my wizard doesn't use staffs, and I got rid of it.
Wow, even the DM wanted you to have it.
Yeah, because my wizard was like, no, staffs are for old wizards, and my wizard was young, and I was like, when I get older, maybe, but until then, here, you want this? And I just gave it to the guild.
That's crazy, because it's so funny that you say that too about like 5th, because I feel like that's how the appeal of 5th really came to be, because it did turn into this whole, like, you could be these crazy powerful beings, and and it doesn't take that long to become that. Like in other editions, it takes forever to be a really good fighter, a really good wizard,
Yes.
But you get it quick, you get it fast, so you get this rush of like, oh, I'm so powerful, I'm gonna mow through all your monsters and go crazy,
Well, that's why I like to call 5th edition characters anime protagonists. that's like, genuinely, that's the closest that I can compare it to. And I think, I don't know. I that's why I started getting into old school D&D. I have a stack of 1st edition AD&D books here that I was going to talk about in a little bit, but I also started getting into OSR stuff, basic fantasy, BX as they call it, like 0 edition AD&D, basic before it became expert D&D, and yeah, dude, if you're a wizard, or I think they call it a magic user back then, it wasn't a wizard or a sorcerer, it was just magic user. Level 1, you get like 1 spell.
Oh my god.
That's it. You have like 3 hit points, and you have maybe a staff that does like 1d3 damage, 1d6 rolled down or whatever.
Oh man.
So did a lot of hiding.
Yeah, you were not a hero. You were a regular. You were better than your typical farmer or your typical merchant, but you're not a demigod. You're a regular guy, and death is a real thing.
Yeah.
You literally just graduated from cleaning your master's robes, and you got 1 spell, and you left the tower. That's it.
I like to akin it to, I don't know if you guys have ever seen Terry Pratchett's The Color of Magic.
Mm-hmm.
No.
It takes place in the Discworld books, which is one of the more prominent fantasy IPs out there. It's almost as big as Lord of the Rings, but not really.
Okay.
But there is a wizard who is basically a nobody. He's been with the Wizarding College for 40-something years. He has white hair, white beard, and he's not even a level 1 wizard. He's so bad at magic. That's kind of what you are in old school D&D. 5th edition, God, what do you even get at level 1?
A lot.
6. You get 6 spells of first level.
Yeah.
Insane.
And then non-magic users, they get multiple different skills immediately, and by level 2 you already have 4 different special abilities that you can use. I mean, it is crazy. But like circling back to like introducing your characters, that's what you have to remind them, like if especially with 5th edition, that like you are this crazy character, and like like you guys are the heroes, but you got to remember like there's a lot of things that are involved with D&D. It's not just min-maxing and being the best you can be. It's like, role-playing your character correctly and figuring out creative ways to fight things. And I feel like as a DM, you have to bring that out in the forefront, like your first game. Like you gotta figure it out. You have to find certain ways to have your characters think like that and have your players think like, oh, maybe I could do like this.
It's been my experience that min-maxers, they get bored really quick.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not that they just get boring to run for, but they themselves, once they get what they want, since it is that power fantasy and like just gratification, they're like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
And they'll stop playing at like 7th level once they got that spell they wanted, because now they're bored.
Definitely.
So,
or they change their entire alignment because they have a new toy to play with,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you could even say that like I know like games like World of Warcraft that I've played where that is literally the peak of min-maxing. Like you need to have the perfect stats on your perfect gear and things like that. And I know for me, like
and
that's
big shoulder pads.
Yeah, the biggest you can have, like bigger than your
the
head.
best with spikes.
Yeah.
Plus
a transmogs.
If you nod off, you're gonna just pierce your head.
Yeah. But I always like when I finally get my character together and I have the perfect stats, that's when I start to kind of fall off, because it's like, well, now I'm here. I made it. My character's really good now, but like now I don't have progression.
To be fair, though, World of Warcraft is designed that way. Yeah. And unless you have player created role-playing experiences with other players, like on RP servers, there isn't anything else to do, really.
Yeah, honestly. Exactly.
That level of that aspect of player agency is never really there to begin with.
Yeah.
That's what makes tabletop RPGs so great, because it's kind of video gamey, but at the same time, you can do whatever.
Right.
How many times in World of Warcraft can you walk up to Goldshire and say, I'm going to punch the barmaid in the face?
You can't.
You can't do it. D&D, I can walk up to her and, spill beer and on the barmaid, or start a fight with somebody outside, one of the blacksmiths,
or seduce the barmaid to get information that you would never even be able to get originally. Exactly
right. And that comes down back to what I was saying before about expectation. If you talk to your players about what is expected of them, if you tell them, like, for example, when you're a DM and you're doing your first steps of world building, personally, I like to pull from a bunch of different resources when it comes to world building. But it's good to let your players know, like, hey, this is a high fantasy, this is a low fantasy, this is a dark fantasy, or a dark low fantasy. Magic is not very common here. It's mostly just a bunch of dirty peasants and murderers and thieves and highwaymen, and you're a nobody, and you have like some crappy banged up rusted sword, but you're trying to make a name for yourself.
Yeah.
If you set it in stone early, it prevents, or at least it lessens the chances of your entire session running away from you.
That makes a lot of sense too, because I know that sometimes, like, just a side note, I really wanted to get the three of us together because I thought it was a really fun dynamic, because I'm a year young in DMing. I've been playing, just as long as you, 10 years when we started playing, about 10 years ago. But I just started DMing last year. and I think I'm like just hitting a year in about a month or so. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great.
Can we get like a sound effect of like a crowd cheering?
Yeah, I'll put it in. Here's
okay.
Here's a crowd. Yeah, but
future self insert cheering.
Yeah, insert cheer here. But yeah, I thought it was cool because I'm a year young. Stavi, you've been on and off with it for quite a long. I mean, you were our original DM, so you've been at least for 10 years. You've been doing it, and then Mike here. I mean, he's been doing it since freaking second edition. So I was like, I thought it'd be fun to have like a brand new DM.
Baby.
Yeah, Thaco, yeah. Oh, jeez.
Thaco.
But having a brand new DM, someone who's been doing it for quite a few years, and someone's been doing it for many years, I thought it'd be cool to kind of bring us all together because I know I need ideas. So, because that's a big thing for me too, is like sometimes I'm noticing that like I have a hard time explaining certain things, getting into things. I feel like my introduction to characters was a very basic thing. It was very easy to do, but keeping that learning process going, like how I run a game, it's kind of weird. I feel like I'm a little too forgiving. At times, I definitely give away a little bit too much stuff, but it's all about feeling out the players,
And that's fine. You are the dungeon master.
Yeah,
you decide the parameters of what happens in regards to that. I'm a little bit more brutal, Mike. I don't know about you, but like when I DM, and I wasn't at first. And you guys know this. I gave you so many get out of jail free cards when we had God, what was his name? Shio.
Oh yeah.
And like I in the beginning, I just wanted us to play. I wanted us to have fun. I wanted you guys to retain and maintain your characters. I didn't want anybody to die. So I resurrected people through the will of gods and all this other stuff to prevent people from dying. Now that I've been DMing for on and off 9 years, I don't care. I don't care if your character dies. I don't care if you spent 16 hours doing your backstory and turning yourself into an anime protagonist. You do something stupid like run down a hallway full of swinging blades and acid pits, and you roll a 1, specifically with 5th edition with skill checks, and you're gonna die.
Yeah,
your body is dead. Sorry,
Yeah.
But
I always tell my players they can do whatever they want, but just understand there are consequences. So if you want to punch the blacksmith, he's gonna hit you back.
Right.
Or he's gonna get the guards, or that barmaid that you were flirting with, you failed really badly, her husband might beat the shit out of you. Like, there are consequences. So do whatever you want, but just understand it's gonna get to you eventually.
Yeah, definitely.
And what you're able to do, Mike, as a DM is really astonishing, even for somebody who has been playing and DMing for a while. With your world building and your level of dynamic storytelling, somehow, some way, you make things work, and you also make it feel believable. It wasn't just like a retcon situation where you had to come up with a reason why this thing happened on the fly because the players did something you didn't expect. Even if that is what you do, you make it feel natural. And I feel like skills like that do come with time, and it also does come with experience playing with different types of players.
Yeah. I just a little backstory on that. We ran a quick game with Mike here, and something happened where my game had to get canceled or something like that. And Mike was like, "Oh, I can run a game." And he took about 15 to 20 minutes, a little bit of prep work, a little bit of typing up on his tablet, and he made this gargantuan, amazing one shot that lasted about, I don't even know, 5 hours, 6 hours, who knows. It was insane, and I was like, I've never seen a DM do something like that before. I mean, how'd you even like?
Was that the one? Was that the one with the eye of Nergal, and like there was like the undead Trent at the end?
No, not that one. That was another one you did.
Is this the one? Is this the one with the Fae? With the Fae?
Yes. With the Fae,
yes.
Yeah. Stavi was in on that one too.
Yes.
Yep, I was.
Yeah, that thing was
amazing.
Insane.
Everyone made the pre-gen. We had the pre-gen characters, and everyone was just first level.
Yep.
And crazy stuff ensued.
It was insane.
The way that you managed to like meld and marry together different genres too, like some of it was, fantasy and fantastical, but then it turned very quickly into a horror game.
Yeah.
Most of my things do.
And it was awesome.
It was just this guy you met at a bar. He was upset about something, and he didn't want to marry this girl, and you were trying to help the guy the best you could. So we were like, all right, well let's let him escape. So we took him and we ran him off into the woods, and we found these fairies, and they entranced us and kind of talked to us, and it seemed like
there was a time loop.
Yeah, like all of a sudden we made a mistake, and the fairies told us, like, you made a mistake, and it time looped us back to the bar where we met the guy that didn't want to marry this girl, and we felt bad for him. And it just kept going and going into this like a crazy story. Like, and I've never seen.
I just realized. Not only did I do the trope of the group meeting in a bar, I did it multiple damn times because it was the time loop.
Dude, it's the same classic setup. It's the classic setup. You meet in a bar. Everyone's sitting around. You can't beat it. But
I really appreciate the input a lot, so thanks.
Dude, I mean, it was awesome. And again, like, I've been playing for 10 years, so I've been watching DMs, make worlds and make campaigns, and it wasn't until your game where it finally made me think I need to start taking notes on what DMs do. Like, I've been playing other games now, and I've been taking notes. Okay, how does this DM do something? How does this DM do something? And just like how players are in terms of going min-max or full role-playing, dungeon masters are completely different too. I mean,
for sure.
I just played a couple months ago. This awesome guy that I know, Brandon, he ran a game, and it was, these hard-hitting, mid-maxing monsters that beat the crap out of you, and it was combat heavy, and it was gritty and intense, and I was like, wow, that was like a lot of combat. And then, again, going back to Mike's story, that was like literally just straight RP. I think we battled one thing.
Yeah.
I think the main bad fae turned into an owlbear.
That's it. That's what it was.
That's at the end, and you fought him trying to get through the portal and save the kid who was being taken by the female fae, and that was pretty much it. The whole thing wasn't fighting.
Yeah, exactly.
And it worked well.
Yeah.
And, my partner, Jackie, this was pretty much like one of her first times ever playing D&D. And after the game, we talked about it, and she vehemently said that she enjoyed herself.
That's awesome.
Like, even though there was no combat, there was no like strategizing in terms of how to overcome a violent situation. It was more like, how can we use our characters' wit and their brains and their perspectives of what's happening around them and make this story work.
Well, that goes back to like actually the topic too, because since you all were invested and interwoven in the story, even though you just heard it, you wanted the story to continue. And since you wanted the story to continue, you were part of the story. So you couldn't just opt out or just kill everyone, because you wanted to know what was going on.
Yeah. There was one, I mean, I'm sure there wasn't, but there was kind of one way that you had to figure this out. So you couldn't go too far off. You had to figure it out, You had to repeat certain things to see if certain things worked, and then, that didn't work. All right, let's try something else here. Like, that was, it was awesome. It was really good.
It was pretty brilliant.
It really was.
All right, I don't have a cam up, so you can't see the blushing, but okay, cut it out.
Well, so going back to the topic, introducing new players to your world, I guess, let me answer that question with a question. Do you prefer to do more extended campaigns, long-term, multi-chapter, multi-session, like huge overarching stories, or do you prefer to do brief little one-shots using the same characters within the same setting? That, like one week you guys meet up, there's somebody set the Mage's Tower on fire in town, and you come to find out there's some dark cult or whatever, and then it's over by the time you're done with the one shot. Next week, farmer got abducted, the farms are burning, and you find out that it's orc raiders. But there's no huge overarching thing. There's no greater evil that is plaguing and affecting your world. or do you want that? Do you want something from start to finish, this huge thing?
That was something that for me personally happened naturally, because I originally started DMing. I wanted to just run a one shot, so I just kind of ran a very basic. You're in a dungeon, you get through it, congratulations. But all of my players, they wanted to continue, and I enjoyed DMing, so I said, all right, well, we'll do another one shot. But you kind of have to keep, they wanted to play the same characters, so I had to keep them kind of in a similar story. So I put them in okay, now they all have a set. I think I was going to run stuff from Candlekeep, the one book that came out a couple months ago.
Right.
So I basically told them, okay, you are all, for your own, independent reasons, heading to Candlekeep to do whatever you're going to do. But you decide to travel together. And that's how it all started. And then it just progressed. And then all of a sudden they were at a city. And I was like, this is a cool idea. And I made a whole city out of it. And I didn't know getting into it that that's what this was going to turn into. And I guess that's another good point too, is, introducing characters. Sometimes it can be important, sometimes it couldn't, because if you're just running one shots and with different characters, I mean, I don't know, is there a point to it, or is there not? I don't really know. That is a good point. I didn't even think of that.
What do you prefer, Mike? Do you like longer, more extended campaigns, or just brief one shots with new characters?
This is going to sound weird, and I think it just stems from that I freeform a lot of it. That usually every first game I run is a one shot. If a campaign grows from that, from the background, the story, and like the interactions of the players with the world, then a campaign will grow from that.
That's a good way of putting it.
I always do have, like I said, my worlds are alive regardless if the players are in them or not. Sometimes I have worlds I haven't even run in. I just have an idea and they're in my brain, and then I get obsessed and I write it, I make gods, I make creation myths, I do all of this stuff, and then it's like 50, 100 pages, and I'm like, done. I don't know if I'll ever run in it, but done. It has people that do things, and it has antagonists, protagonists, whatever. So my worlds are alive regardless of the players, but if they link up to one of the ongoing struggles in the world, then it will turn into a campaign. But if they don't, and they just want to kill dire wolves, that's cool too, but the world's still going to be spinning.
Right. That's definitely true. That's and again, that just goes back to that natural progression of how the players want to do it, how they're introducing themselves and getting into your world. And if they do, if they want to learn more, they can, and if they don't, well then screw it. Let's just go kill friggin' orcs and goblins for 10 hours, whatever. What about?
Sometimes players just don't want to do the plot. They want to like stop goblins, and they don't want morality. They just want to stop a monster. So sometimes you just have to, do a filler episode and just pop one in.
Exactly. What about you, Stavi?
Well, I think I'm going to have to go with Mike on that, to be honest. I mean, it's easier for me to, if I'm doing world building, I like to put in the work to add all the detail, add all of the different kingdoms and fiefdoms, to talk about, even going as far as like the economy for different towns. If you have one town that's up in the mountains, clearly they're only still around because of maybe their iron or their silver mines or their gold mines. And that plays a bigger part in the story too, because then you have, as a DM, a target for a one shot. So if you do the prep work ahead of time, and even if it's very basic, one or two towns, maybe one major city in an area, and you don't even talk about the rest of the continent, you just have it there just as a blank slate that to expand on as your players play. But if you start with a single location, whether that's some sort of old prison dungeon somewhere out in the wilderness that's overgrown and you're there for whatever reason, or a town that the players start in, like in a tavern, starting small and then expanding is easier for me. I like putting in the work ahead of time, detailing the world, which is why I brought this stuff out, because I wanted to show you guys, and anybody who's watching and listening, back in the day, Gary Gygax, his first ever campaign that he did for old school D&D, and I know different people feel differently about him as a dungeon master. He's very brutal. The first thing he ever created was the village of Hamlet. I know it's backwards, but this is his personal campaign that he played with his friends at the kitchen table back in the 70s. And it started off as just a single little town, and that's all it was. Over the years, as his people started playing more and more, it expanded into this massive kingdom called the World of Greyhawk. And Hamlet is in here, but so is the Temple of Elemental Evil. I don't know if you guys have, that is part of the Greyhawk setting. So starting small and expanding and breathing life into your world as time progresses, for me, is more enjoyable as a DM, as a world builder. Being able to detail certain things and allowing the players to mess around with those mechanics is kind of fun for me too. So yeah, long-winded TLDR, I like to start off small but detailed.
Yeah, I feel like most DMs are like that too, honestly. Like from every game I've ever played, it's always started off with, here's a small little setting and you just go along with it. And I guess even Gary Gygax himself just exploded into this whole campaign with different characters and stuff. And I guess pretty much every single DM does that. I don't know.
You can't help but do that, because starting small, and then you're like, oh, they like this, I'll do it again. And then you're like, well, now what's their neighbor kingdom like? And then it just keeps growing. Like, what do they worship? What do they eat? What do they keep as pets? What's the marriage ritual like? What's their funeral ritual? And then it just keeps going and going and going.
Yeah, I mean, I'm even doing that right now. I mean, I don't want to, Mike is one of my players. I don't want to spoil anything. But,
la 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 la.
But that's kind of what I'm doing right now. There's something going on in our world, and there seems like there's a war brewing, and the king of your city is he's looking for allies, and he needs to go out and find these allies, and he's asking for the players for their help to go out to these different cities and see what there is to explore out in their little bubble of Faerun. So they're going out to, and now I'm kind of bringing in real towns and stuff, and incorporating real lore about these towns of Faerun, and I'm having a lot of fun with that, because you can see different places that around you where you are, and it gives you kind of a broader sense of like, this is the world that we're at. This is this one. It has developed now from this little town to this broader area of territories and allies and potentially enemies. So yeah, I definitely that's definitely how it always goes, the progression like that, 100%.
One thing that does need to be mentioned, and I feel like anybody who ever talks in great length about D&D stuff to the public, even on Reddit, it needs to be mentioned that too much detail can also be a bad thing.
Yes, definitely.
What a lot of people akin to what's called the Mercer Effect. For those of you who don't know, and I'm sure you do if you know Dungeons and Dragons, Matt Mercer is the Dungeon Master for Critical Role, and he does amazing work, but like, he does it because he knows that he has an audience. It's not just the players, it's not just a DM, it's literally tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people watching it, and they have to set it up like a sitcom. They have to set it up like a Game of Thrones, next time, like kind of thing. And you need to be careful about that, I feel. Sometimes less is more in that regard, especially when you're doing world building with an already established continent or world like Faerun. Obviously, there is Baldur's Gate. We know about Neverwinter.
Right.
We know that Luskan is a thing to the north. And all these places are already established. Beautiful thing about D&D, though, is you can do whatever you want. Mm-hmm. Oh no, Neverwinter exploded in a horrible mage experiment, and now the entire city is leveled. It's gone off the map in my world. That's fine, but I don't know, man. I got caught in the trap of adding too much detail before, and
I have to.
Yeah, it's like I always, when people ask me, I get a little too flowery sometimes when I
Mhm.
talk and I describe things, as people who've played in my games know. So, uh, it's like breathing. It has to be an inhale, exhale, but if you get too obsessed with it, you're gonna hyperventilate,
Yeah.
and you're going to pass out. The world will pass out. It'll drown in its own breath, and you just have to be aware of that. It has to be a back and forth, like just like an ebb and a flow of it. If it starts getting a little too choppy, you have to take a step back.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely. I mean, you can even go talking about that in terms of like just planning games. Like I've planned full on conversations and encounters and stuff, and you sit there for 3 hours with your tablet or your notebook and you write down all this fun little stuff that can happen, and then the players go, no. No, it's not worth it. So I that's originally when I first started DMing, I wrote everything down, and now that I see it's like a breathing. You
Yeah.
feel your players, and then you bring it in, and then put more things out to them.
Yeah, when I first started, yeah, I'm sorry. When I first started, I wrote everything down too, so I feel you on that.
Yeah.
Same. I did full conversations and
Hmm.
like dialogue trees, like I was playing Mass Effect,
Yeah, right.
So, you can't do that. You can't get caught up with
I
that.
know. Because then the player
pick,
just says, "Shut up," and then it's like, "Oh, jeez, I just did 20 friggin' minutes of potential talking that is just gone now." It's like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
or even worse, they don't even interact with the NPC that you're giving this information
Nope.
to.
Nope.
You even tell them he's got an exclamation point above his head. He will give you the quest, and they're like, "Nah, I want to pet the horses."
Yeah. No, I want to do battle pets in the forest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, cool. There's a dice game. Let's do that for 3 fucking hours.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Well, let's get drunk and do bar fights
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
gold.
Let's have the just recently I had a little side thing before a main quest. The side thing took 2 hours. I didn't even think it was going to be a little 15-20 minute thing. It turned into freaking 2 hours. I was like, man, I hope I have enough time for the main stuff here. That's just how it goes.
And that has definitely happened with us before, Dan, too. When I was DMing, like I would have a main sort of plot for that session that I wanted you guys to get through, and then either you or Eddie, or most likely Eddie, because he really loved to like hyper focus on the details,
Yeah.
and then try to pursue it very like further, and it would just rip the whole thing in half, and then okay, I guess this is the session now. We're exploring why that child had a nosebleed.
Oh, dude, that must have been
or whatever.
that must have been so hard too, because Eddie was so focused. Our one buddy Eddie, he was so focused on every single detail, and then there was my character that was just like, I'm just gonna go do everything I put my mind to and just not care about anybody else. So that constant back and forth must have been a pain in the ass. I'm sorry.
No, because when you're kind of as a DM thrown into the crucible, of player agency, you have to learn to adapt, and you only really learn that skill not from watching Chris Perkins at PAX, not from watching Matt Mercer. I mean, I guess you could pick up methods, but to take it from paper and put it into practice, the only real way to learn how to do any of that is to actually be put through it with your players.
Yeah, you have to be derailed at least once or twice in your
you
career,
have to.
and then you know how to expect it, but you have to go through that shit.
Right. And then you learn how to avoid it when your players are like, oh man, there's a door over there with a padlock behind that store, and I saw a shady man walk in there, because you just happened to mention that some shady dude walked down that alleyway. And then so they're following this random guy when they're supposed to be bringing medicinal herbs to like some dying orphanage kid in an orphanage. So they chase this guy, and now you got to do this whole thing. And so you learn to say, oh yeah, you peer around the corner and you find out that the guy is homeless and he's just sleeping in a box.
Yeah.
He's sleeping in a shipping crate. There's nothing special about him.
I had that so bad one time where I had all the players go to sleep the night before a crazy event was going on, and one decided to stay up I believe maybe she was an elf, so she had trance or something like that. And she rolled a really high, like, it was like, I if it wasn't a 19, it was a crit on perception, just to look around. So I was like, you see a guy, a quick shadow that just glanced by, and she was like, I'm going. And she just went. And I'm like, well, no, it was just something you saw, and it was kind of like a foreshadow, like, oh, so maybe something bad will happen. But she took it as like, no, this is bad. I need to go figure this out now. Get the crew. We gotta, I'm like, no. Stop. No, we're not. Ah, jeez. But yeah.
Wait, so did she roll perception while she was transing?
I believe she woke up at some point and decided to roll perception because she's the person I'm talking about. She's a newer player, so she was like, I want to roll perception. I was like, okay, well, you have to, you got to wake up and do what you want to do, and she decided to do that, and it's.
I've had situations like that ended in TPKs.
Oh, no way!
Like,
oh yeah,
they were just hanging out, and someone just mentioned like a myth about this black dragon god that was imprisoned in the mountainside, and he was able to dig half his way out, and he enslaved these orcs to help him dig the rest of the way out, and they would have to like get supplies and blah 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 blah. So like, we're going to the Black Mountains, and I was like, you don't have to go.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, why would you mention it unless it's the campaign? So they went and they died.
Oh jeez.
And they were like, why did we die? It's the campaign. And I was like, no, it was two drunk assholes talking in the tavern. You didn't have to go.
It wasn't necessary. It was
You really do
it was side lore.
Like, when you're in a bar in real life, and two drunk people are telling a story, you don't go check it out.
Yeah. To be fair, though, that's definitely the player's fault for taking meta information and being like, oh, well, it's part of a game. It's part of the campaign. Like, yeah, you might think that as a player, but your character doesn't think that sitting there having drinks.
No, not at all. Your character literally would probably be like, I'm going nowhere near that. I'm second level.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, I just left my home. My dad gave me his sword, and he gave me the family horse. Why would I fight a dragon god?
But I mean, if you attempted to bring them back and they just kept going, I mean, that's their own damn fault at this point. You did your duties as a DM, and whatever happens.
Yeah, I'm like, it's just a rumor. It might not even be true. They could just die of hypothermia in the mountains. Like, you don't know.
And that was a thing that they emphasized a lot on in classic D&D. If you pick up literally any module that they used to pre-print, in the beginning of each one of these, usually the beginning of each one of these, they have a rumor table. And nice. So, you force your players at the beginning, like if they're in a town, to roll on the rumor table. And then whatever they roll, you read them the rumor. Some of them are true. Some of them are false. Some of them are false to a point where it's like the opposite is true. Somebody would, be like, oh, well, there's a gang of bandits. Okay, no, that's not true. There is no gang of bandits. Or there is a gang of bandits, but they're all undead. And they're being led by a necromancer, and they can't be killed by conventional weapons.
Oh, jeez.
There are layers to it, and I feel like... doing that to players is probably a good idea. It's probably a good idea to mention false rumors and true rumors.
Yeah, but it's about like learning how your characters play, in your world. Right. It's so funny. Like, I love how this turned from how do you introduce your players to your game to how do you learn from your players on how to run your world. Because that's literally what it comes down to, I guess. At this point, it really is like the players learn as much as you learn from them. It's pretty crazy. But
in a way, that's how you introduce them.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, by just giving them your world, and like the way they, digest that's up to them.
Yeah, exactly.
And how they interact with it, how they manipulate it, and manipulate the politics of it.
Yeah.
I mean, we were just talking before about how, like, as DMs, we like to start small and then gradually build as our players play. We, as DMs, like you said, are learning our world as the players are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, you definitely want to hook. You want to hook them in. You want to bring them in to begin with so they sit at the table and take it seriously. You need something outlandish, or maybe not. Maybe, your players are just very generic fantasy enthusiasts who just want to do sword and sorcery.
Yeah.
But if you have something interesting to them that they want to sit, take it seriously, and come back next week, come back next session and sit down, then you're like, okay, I have something here. We can expand upon this, and a lot of that is give and take between the players and the DM. There's a dynamic there that's mostly, I feel, unspoken, or it's known, but it's unspoken that like one needs the other.
Yeah.
For it to work.
Definitely. Yeah. It's definitely, you really are. You're learning from each other. I mean, especially when you're a new DM or new players, you're learning from everybody. I guess at the end of the day, everybody's learning. The whole world is about learning. That's what it comes down to.
Yep.
So Dan, as a new DM, what is your biggest hurdle when it comes to not only organizing players to sit down and start a session, but to keep them, I guess, invested, or rather for them to take it seriously enough for you to continue on building and evolving your story?
Yeah. Well, so I'm still trying to figure that out. I feel like there's a lot of information I lose, like I'm not keeping, first of all, I'm not keeping great notes, which I feel like I really need to start doing. There you go. There's the notes right there. Taking notes of the podcast. But, yeah, I cause there's a lot of things is, I forget something that I might have said and my players remind me, and, I'm like, oh shoot. Yeah. Okay. That's what we did. And I think one of my biggest hurdles is just trying to keep everybody engaged, because I feel like I have a very good balance of some players just want to go out and kill stuff, and some players really want to get into the RP of it, which I personally, that's how I like to play too. I love to get into the RP. Combat's cool, but RPing is so much fun. And trying to keep that balance is kind of my biggest thing right now, and also sometimes coming up with certain ideas that fall flat. I feel like I get really discouraged on. Like, there's a couple of things that I come up with and I think it's really cool, and then it kind of flopped. And I'm like, oh, that sucks. Am I a good DM? Am I a bad DM? But in reality, you just gotta keep pushing forward, I guess.
Yeah, don't let that hit you really hard. As one of the, like, I'm playing in your game, you're doing great.
Yeah,
thank you. And if anything you feel doesn't land, just remember how many fairy tales, legends, and myths that no one knows anymore because they didn't land when people told them.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many things that don't land in mythology. Like, there's so many gods no one knows about because there's like a god with like, it's like a snake with the hair of a human. Who the hell cares? Yeah. It's weird. No one wants to worship that. So you just move on. It just, it happened. It's in the world. It's part of the canon. Just move on.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you learned really well from the Nox spell.
Oh man.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah, you were even there for that.
Like, that's never.
I was there. I was there.
That never happened again.
Oh,
everything now has multiple locks.
Yeah,
you learn really well from that.
Yeah. So going back to planning way too much. Real quick before we end here, this quick story. I wanted to get the players again. I wanted to do another knockout scene. It was a little mini story with a returning character. So I wanted to knock them out again and put them in a dungeon and start in this little room with a riddle. And it was 3 locks with 3 different numbers, and it was basically a combination lock. But what I did was, when I first started the session, I was like, okay, there's going to be 3 numbers that I'm going to make sure I point out. So when the session first started, it's like, all right, you guys all wake up in your home, and it is 9:00 in the morning. Like, I put it out there like that. Like, okay. Then as they went, they had to go kill a bunch of goblins for the farmer. So they went out there, and there was 7 goblins. And the farmer was so happy that you killed all of them. He was like, "Oh yeah, come on in. I'll serve you up some lunch." And oh, sorry, I only have 4 placemats for the 5 of you. So sorry, one of you are just gonna have to eat with your hands. Ha ha ha. So it was and in that little room there was a picture of a goblin, a placemat for a dinner, and there was a clock in there, and it was to try to get the. And I thought it was such a really cool riddle and fun idea, and my bard just went up and went, "I cast knock." And for those of you who don't know what knock is, knock is a level 2 spell that immediately unlocks any type of lock, combination lock, a bunch of different types of things. And I was just like,
magical locks,
I think
even.
Yeah, and I was just like, yeah, okay, sure. You got it, damn it. that whole hour of planning that out, and just a cast of a spell, and that was it.
I also want to say, at no point should a spell that powerful be given to somebody at level 2.
Definitely, that's BS.
That's that power fantasy I'm talking about. That should be an 8th level spell minimum.
Yeah, at least. Well, again, it's all about learning.
You learn. It's all about learning. That's right. You learn. That's right.
Yep.
So before we wrap things up, there is one other thing that I wanted to just briefly talk about. And as a DM, I think this is going to be important for all of us and anybody who's watching, is it's okay to take inspiration from other sources.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay? Because if you look at Harry Potter literally would not exist if it weren't for Lord of the Rings. 100% ring wraiths, okay, Nazgul, more or less. But it's okay to take aspects from different things, even different games, even different types of games, right? Because we're talking about a tabletop RPG, fantasy RPG. I recently started getting into tabletop wargaming. I just want to give a quick shout out to this here because this is awesome. It is a fantasy tabletop war game, but it's just agnostic enough rules wise where you can take things from here and put it into your campaign. And funny enough, it is something that I am doing for my partner, for Jackie, for our basic fantasy campaign that I started. Which, Dan, did you get this?
Not yet. I do have to get it still.
I definitely want to play this. But yeah, what I want to do, and this is completely off topic, but I actually want to try to meld the two together, because D&D started out as a game called Chainmail, which was a tabletop wargaming game, and then it evolved into squad-based, smaller scale, not giant armies, and then it kept shrinking and shrinking until it became individual players, individual characters. And then that's when the role play started coming in. In fact, Chainmail didn't even get its fantasy component until well after the game actually launched. It was a historical fantasy, or a historical war game, and then it became fantasy, and then D&D came to be. But so what I want to do is I want to mix this wargaming in with the campaign.
That's cool. I like that.
It's good to have that kind of wargaming knowledge, especially if your players are down for it, because then you can, you were talking about kings in your campaign, asking the players to look for people to fight for them.
Yeah.
This would be a perfect example of bringing in the wargaming stuff, because then you can have a mini of your character and your party even with the people that you've been gathering for this king to start a battle between. And then once that battle is done, then it could evolve back to tabletop role playing after the events of the battle. So
that's such a cool idea too, because I feel like as a DM you almost have to pull inspiration from other things, from other games you played, from things you've watched, because otherwise you don't really know where to go with it. I pull a lot of inspiration from video games that I played. World of Warcraft was a big one. Game of Thrones, my God, my favorite show of all time. I pulled tons of inspiration from that, and I feel like you can definitely see it. You can tell from a DM, oh, this guy plays this, or this guy watches that.
Right.
You can tell.
For me, it was Elder Scrolls.
Elder Scrolls is a good one too.
Yeah, because Sheo Gorath was one of the gods.
Oh yeah.
So.
Yeah. What about you, Mike?
It's a little more odd, as keeping with my my archetype here.
Okay.
I am really into like myth and lore and religions and things like that. So like I try to ingest as much pseudo versions of that and real world versions of that, like cryptozoology and ancient aliens, and I just watch all of this stuff. Like to try to like learn as many theories out there, and then I tweak the theories to fit whatever I want, and then they give me ideas and inspiration for different settings, either it be horror, sci-fi, fantasy, like bio horror, like all different weird things. So I try to like ingest as much weirdness as possible.
That's cool. I like that.
That's why my games seem to be the way they are.
Yeah. And I totally get that, because that one shot you ran a couple of weeks ago with like the freaking zombified people and all that, and things falling off their bodies and stuff. I could totally see where you get that from.
It's very Dead Space.
Oh yeah, exactly. But I think like the number one thing is inspiration from like other DMs too. Like just seeing what they do, and then
for sure.
Not taking what they made, but like learning from it and then kind of making it your own thing. I feel like that's a really, really big thing.
Well, so tell me if you guys wanted to add anything to this, but effectively as a new DM, I have written down 3 so far. Basic core tenets that I think you need to keep in mind when developing your game world and introducing your players into it. Number 1 that I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast was expectation. Okay.
For sure.
The second one I feel that's very important is communication.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
And actually, I'm going to add another one. Inspiration, I think, is another important thing. Feel free to pull inspiration from multiple sources, as long as you make it work and your players are enjoying themselves. And the last one, I feel like, is execution. The ability to execute on everything that you've established for your players. And the players, conversely, their ability to execute their roles as characters in the world that you've built for them.
Just what we were talking about from the start. It's, you learn from your players, they learn from you, you set it up for them, they play it, you learn from them playing, and you bring it right back to them. It really is. It's like an ebb and flow. It really is.
Yeah, neither can be separate.
Yeah.
But definitely not separate for too long. Otherwise, both will just fall.
Right. And all of these 4 tenets, they only exist because it goes both ways.
Right.
For sure.
There's expectations on both sides. There's communication on both sides. There's inspiration for both sides. Anything that a DM does, and it's really, really cool, they come up with this idea and the players really dig it, they could use it as inspiration to build their own character's backstory, for example. Or use it as a plot device, later on in the future. And of course, the execution is both sides.
Yeah.
DM executing the game and the players executing their characters. So
that's like, that was like the perfect wrap up right there. That was perfect. What did we learn today?
Yeah.
And that's perfect. So yeah, awesome. So there you go. There's the first episode of Crithalla, the podcast. I really enjoyed this, guys. You guys, this worked out way better than I thought.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks. It was really great.
Thanks for having us, Dan.
Yeah, I could just talk forever. So it's fine. As I just did.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Me too. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. You can catch this podcast when I can figure out a way to put it up. However, the video version of this podcast is up on the Crithalla YouTube page. Crithalla on YouTube. I also make top 10s and story lore videos, and I review D&D products and stuff like that. So if you want to go over and subscribe over there and leave a like, that'd be awesome. Stabby, where can they find you?
In Colorado.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I did used to live stream all the time, that kind of took sort of back burn. It's on the back burner right now. So, I mean, you could find me on YouTube also. I haven't really put anything up, but I will soon. I'm actually doing unboxing videos for some old board games. I got the original 1980 something Hero Quest.
Oh yeah, dude.
that I managed to pick up.
Nice.
As well as the new Kill Team and a couple of other things. Wargaming. I'm going to be doing a bunch of that stuff. Battle reports. So you can check that out. I think it's on YouTube as Warband Gaming. You could find me there.
And Mike, you got any plugs?
I'm pretty much just lurking around everywhere, and hopefully, the more I get comfortable doing things, the more maybe I'll be doing more things. So, to be announced, I guess.
Well, fair enough. When you get that awesome YouTube page up and running, I'll make sure I put a link in every single thing.
Nice.
Well, again, thank you guys so much for listening to the Crithalla podcast. Hope you have a great one. My name is Olskit Flack, and have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Bye.